Hey guys, I'm going to come out here with a hot take right off the bat. I think Astrobot is a great game. Honestly, brave. I know. No one has been saying anything positive about it since it was released, and because of that, and after playing it, I figured I'd speak up and talk about why I loved this game so much, and what Sony can learn from Astrobot. Before we get into the review though, if you enjoy this sort of stuff, remember to like and subscribe, it helps my channel out a ton. I'll top into the review, start off with a little background on Astrobot. Developed by Team Asobi, Astrobot is technically the third game in the series, but is the first full-length traditional game, with the first game being focused on VR, and the second being a shorter showcase-style game for the PS5. Now, even though this is the third Astrobot game, Team Asobi didn't come out of nowhere. In fact, if you're interested in game news at all, you might know them better as a division of the famous and now defunct Japan studio, which is known for things like Ape Escape, Gravity Rush, and The Last Guardian, among many other games. While Team Asobi wasn't involved in those particular games being founded in 2012, I think it's important to note the environment they would have been surrounded by. They eventually spun off into their own studio within PlayStation in 2021 as Japan Studio was shut down. From there, as a division of Japan Studio and as a first-party PlayStation dev, Team Asobi has been led from the beginning by Nicolas Doucet, who before leading the team worked on LEGO games such as LEGO Island and LEGO Racers. Once he moved to Sony, it looked like he worked with the iToy team in London before moving to Japan Studio. Now, I don't know the guy, but the previous experience with LEGO and the iToy seems like the perfect experience to lead Team Asobi towards VR and gameplay-focused experiences. He has also been with the same team since the Playroom in 2013, which is their first game, as Team Asobi. Just another point to be made for keeping video game developers over many years so they can grow into their role. I can only imagine how much having someone so steeped in the culture helped to make the gameplay and overall experience of Astrobot such a great experience. I just have to think those things were related in some way. Speaking of the gameplay of Astrobot, that really is the first thing I think of when I think of the game. Which is great because it makes me completely forget that there isn't really much of a story here besides what is needed to give a reason to go from level to level. All you really need to know is that you are once again tasked with going from world to world and rescuing parts of the PS5, only this time on a much larger scale. It's pretty much the last game fully realized, and just completely taking advantage of every aspect of a full development cycle. I don't say that negatively at all, the fact that the game doesn't have much of a story, it's just that I usually care more about that, so the fact that there is very little of that, and I still enjoy the experience, seems to be a testament to how great this thing plays. It's almost like if the platformers from the PS2 never stopped being made and they continued to release until the current generation, improving throughout the years. It's that good, and the only thing I can really think of rivaling how good it feels in recent years would be something like Mario Odyssey, just in terms of scope and polish. To go a little deeper, let's talk about Astro and how he's changed and improved since the last game, Astro's Playroom. It's not that much and that different, but there are a few little changes I want to quickly talk about. Even though he had appeared in a game before that, it was a VR exclusive, so it's safe to assume not as many people have played it, and I haven't, so I can't really talk about my experience. Because of that, Astro's Playroom was my introduction to the character, and while he is already controlled great in that, which is to be expected since it was made to showcase the capabilities of the PS5, Astrobot does improve in a couple ways key to this new game. The first thing I noticed, and probably the most prominent, is the fact that you can swim in this game, and boy does it feel good to do. Swimming is not something that always feels great, so when it feels great, it really hits for me. The controls are simple and fluid, which I think go a long way to stop those sections from feeling annoying. It kind of reminded me of swimming in Ratchet & Clank with the jetpack thing you have to boost in the water. It's not a one-to-one, but the fact that it evokes the same feeling is a good sign. Beyond that, most of Astro's moveset remains the same from the previous game. He's able to jump, hover, and attack with relative ease as you traverse through the levels. One gripe I did have with this was the lack of a sprint or some sort of dash. It wasn't usually an issue, but I would occasionally find myself wishing I could go a little bit faster, mostly in levels I had already been to and was only revisiting to pick up collectibles I had missed the first time around. It was by no means a deal breaker, but I wouldn't have said no to it. So, for the basic moveset, it's pretty standard, but perfected in the way that it feels and responds. I think you could easily play and control Astro with minimal tutorial, and as far as I remember, there is minimal tutorial, which is amazing. It walks a perfect line of showing you how to control the character while not over-explaining for people who are already familiar with the games, or just platformers in general. But it doesn't stop there. As you play through the levels and different worlds, you'll be introduced to level-specific upgrades in a very similar way to the last game. These can be as simple as different forms of jetpacks, or things as creative as a backpack that makes platforms, or an upgrade that shrinks you down to the size of a mouse. It doesn't really matter what they give you because it can always play well and is usually pretty self-explanatory given the context of the level. The only times I felt myself struggling with something new was almost always due to the fact that I just needed to pay a little more attention. I do wish that they utilized these upgrades more in more levels, especially the mouse one, which did really seem underutilized. I think it was only in one level, but I can also see how they could have gone in the other direction and been really annoying to deal with just putting these upgrades in every single level. It could have become gimmick territory super easily. I just had so much fun with them, I never really wanted it to end. A couple other things I want to mention really quickly before we move on from the review gameplay section are the worlds of Astrobot and the collectibles within the game, because I think they do a great job of showing how you can expand an idea and have it be a full thing to do without feeling bloated and pointless. Firstly, the worlds are amazing to play from start to finish. They are full of unique and fun platforming ideas, while also just feeling like what has to be solid game design. I say that not because I'm an expert on the subject, but more so how someone knows food tastes good, even if they aren't a chef. These levels were crafted with care and they feel like it. As you go from area to area, everything flows in a way that lets time slip by. Even while I would have to redo sections over in the challenge areas mostly, it wasn't really a hassle because it was just a marvel to look at. Nothing ever seemed like an afterthought while playing in the world of Astrobot. And that's a great thing because I often had to go back to get the collectible bots left over in each level. And unlike other games that throw collectibles at you and try and fill empty space, the collectibles in Astrobot felt different. First of all, they were framed as robots that needed rescuing, which makes it a lot less difficult to look for them right off the bat, as opposed to something like animus fragments or whatever other random piece of padding companies decide to put in their games. I'm not even against those, but it was nice to have these things I'm looking for feel a little more intentional and integral to the world that I'm playing in. One other thing that these collectibles bots had going for them is the fact that you could interact and purchase accessories for them in the hub area. It's a small thing, but many games don't do that, and it just makes things feel more disconnected and pointless when that happens. I think when it comes down to it, Astrobot was a great experience and a breath of fresh air because of all these things. I feel like there's a lot of lessons that the wider games industry could take from it, and hopefully they do. If there's one thing the industry can learn from Astrobot, speaking to Sony and AAA developers in particular, is that there's clearly a market for fun and challenging arcade-style platformers that are willing to experiment with creative ideas. If they're looking for more examples besides Astrobot to justify this move, Nintendo proves that games like this can be profitable, and many indie devs that there are still new spins on these genres to be mined for. I think that, while profit will always be a driving factor for people in charge of these companies, it is important to remember that there is no profit without passion for the product being made, which Team Asobi obviously has in droves. There will always be people who will buy the same sort of games over and over, but games that are obviously cookie cutter and take no creative risks at all will sell less over time, if not right away, then eventually as people realize nothing new is being made or added to the things they buy. And while platformers are nothing new, they've been a sorely underrepresented genre in recent years, and Team Asobi was able to capitalize on that gap in the gaming landscape while improving on what's come before them and the experiences of their team that they've built. This led me to the other big thing I think large studios and publishers can learn from this game, and something I think they already know but have chose to ignore, which is the fact that experience has clearly been a factor in the success of Astrobot. Nicholas Doucette, like I mentioned before, has been at the company for years and has been able to grow as a developer and as a boss of the small team of a little over 60 people. He also seems to try to bring that same stability to the team he leads. In interviews, he has said that he tries to keep the team small and has, quote, kept a long-term approach of not just growing the team for one project, but growing the team for the future and to keep people long-term. Now, whether that sentiment was caused in part by the closure of Japan Studio is another conversation entirely, but it was something I wanted to highlight because we see it so rarely in the video game industry. In fact, we usually see the opposite as studios grow to mind-boggling numbers before laying off half their staff or more after a game is published. Look at half of the gaming news from the last year and it will be a similar story everywhere you look. So this approach of organic growth that Team Asobi has gone for seems to have paid off. I think it has given the team the security to hone their craft, streamline their output, and take risks, with the added benefit of not having to worry about being fired. It's something special, and hopefully more studios will adopt the model as Astrobot becomes a commercial and critical success. So with all that being said, if you like platformers or PlayStation, I think it's pretty clear that I think you should give this game a try and play it all the way through. It's clear to me that it's made with love from start to finish from a relatively small team as well, which is super impressive to see. Even if you don't know a lot about the history of PlayStation games, you can still have a ton of fun with this, and I would even argue that that can be a plus because it makes you curious to try out games you might have never heard of before. I know I was. Astrobot is a masterclass and standout game this year in my opinion. But what do you guys think? Have you played it yet? And if so, what did you think? If not, why are you holding off? I'd love to talk about it in the comments. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all in the next video, hopefully sooner rather than later. Bye.